everyone, and welcome to Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails, the weekly podcast that helps you grow your business, improve your life, and enjoy yourself along the way. I'm your host, Alan Langer, and every week we try to bring you the best thought leaders, the best business leaders, and the best minds out there to help you succeed in business and in life. So sit back, relax, grab your pad, your pen, and your favorite beverage, and enjoy the next episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. This is your host, Alan Langer, with episode 52 coming at you tonight. And we've got 52 coming from Chicago, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Exactly right.
We've got
Chicago.
Brian Hines with us tonight, and I'm going to introduce Brian in a second because he's going to help us with some sales kind of mentality of sales and some thinking about the reason why you're in sales and all that fun stuff that some of us struggle with. So, but before we get to Brian, just a couple of quick notes. The podcast website is marketingandsalespodcast.com. If you visit that and send me a question for the question of the week, and we read that question, you will get a free signed copy of my book. And we've got a really good question coming up from Jerry, who writes us from Sarasota Springs, Florida. So that's coming up later in the podcast. But right now, without further ado, I am introducing my new friend from Chicago. How you doing, Brian Hines? Welcome to the show.
Doing great, Alan. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor. Appreciate
You're very, very welcome. And this is kind of funny. So I was just telling Brian this right before we hit the record button. This is episode 52 for me. And this is the first time I have a beer. I have a shock top Belgian white. I'm not a big beer drinker, but I really feel like having this. And he's got a Stella, right?
I do. I have a Stella.
Awesome. So two guys drinking a beer. Let's do a virtual cheers to the camera. Brian, thanks for joining me tonight. Cheers. Let's get into some sales talk. So
awesome.
For the folks out there, Brian is the founder, creator of what he calls the Manifestation Mastermind, where he helps salespeople find clarity, kind of what they're best at, what their gifts are, and craft a vision that is aligned with those gifts, which is really cool because salespeople are always just taught to sell. That's where they go to their corporate job, and this is the sales process, and this is how you got to sell, and that's it. So tell us how you got on this path, Brian, and how you started putting this together to help people along this side of the sales.
Yeah, definitely. And my story starts actually in Chicago, and I actually grew up in an affluent neighborhood. And so growing up, money was all around us, and we felt the pressure early on to essentially replicate what our parents had created for us. And so going to school, going to high school, we had all these pressures on us to make a lot of money, no matter what. Like that was what life was all about. Life was about checking boxes. You get good grades in high school, you go to a good college, you get a good internship, you get a good job, and all that involves getting good grades and checking more and more boxes. So for us, again, there was that pressure, and that was life. It was one big competition.
Yep.
And it was a zero-sum game. And so that's how I grew up. And so I actually first began in finance. And so I went to the business school up in the Midwest in Ann Arbor. And the goal there was to get that dream job on Wall Street and eventually end up making a lot of money on Wall Street. Now, I ended up getting that internship. I checked all the boxes, and I hated it.
Yep.
And before that, to earn some money going into my freshman year of college, I sold Cutco knives door to door and was really, really good at it. In fact, during that summer, it was my first experience in sales. I had no idea that if you work really hard, you can make a lot of money. And for me, coming where I came from at the age of 18, I was chomping at the bit to already prove myself going into college. So what I did I shut out my personal relationship. So I kind of shut my girlfriend at the time out of my life, my friends whom I had just graduated with, my family, and I just went balls to the wall, went hard, sold door to door, and made a lot of money. I was like top 10 in the country out of thousands of reps.
So when you say door to door, was this cold door to door, or were they setting appointments for you?
Not cold door to door. No. So you set up the calls. You set up.
I got you. Okay.
essentially cold calling though. You call
to get in the house, right? Yeah.
Yeah. To get in the house, but no, it was
That's
not.
just that's the next step below just door to door. That's hard enough. So
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I had done there, and I'd gotten really good at it. But then when I went to college, my parents, my family had grown up in finance. I was like, okay, I'm going to go into finance. But when I realized that's not what I wanted to do, I was at a crossroads a little bit. I had this perspective that I was like, all right, I want to check the next box, and that is, get the job and move back to a town like Winnetka, where I'm from, or a similar one out in the East Coast or West Coast.
Right.
But so I was chasing after that money. But ultimately, I reached back out to my sales manager at the time. And he was my sales manager for Cutco. So we hadn't spoken in 4 years or so.
Okay.
And moved out to San Francisco and started with the sales and leadership training company out of school. And it was totally different. I was following my intuition. I was doing something unorthodox for a lot of my high school friends and college friends. They're still going down the finance route because where we came from, that's the way you went. And I took the sales route. And so my role there was to enroll people in year-round programs or weekend immersions as well. So after working there, I ultimately moved on from that. But during that time, my role as a 22, 23-year-old was to have intimate conversations with salespeople, sales leaders that were years and sometimes decades and decades older than me, asking them about their personal lives, going deep, asking the deep questions. And during that time, I was asking myself those deep questions as well. And my paradigm shifted. My life for me started becoming about the impact I was here to make and the people I met and playing the long game rather than trying to be a millionaire before the age of 30, which is what a lot of people, me personally, that was my goal originally, and a lot of people my age's goal as well. So from there, I moved on. I worked in tech sales. I sold a multi-carrier shipping API with some guys I met out of San Francisco. They started this company and hired me as one of the first employees. So I did that for a couple of years. And I moved back to the Midwest. And I came back into the environment I had started in. And on the West Coast, I learned a lot about myself, a lot about my inner journey. I got really into meditation. I went on week-long silent meditation retreats. I learned a lot about myself, the various expectations I was trying to live up to, the expectations I put on myself, the expectations that friends and society had put on me. And I slowly but surely, it was an unfolding process, but I slowly started to let those things go. And I discovered who I really was, what my gifts were, and my vision and my why. And so when I came back to Chicago a little over a year ago, I met back up with a lot of my high school and college friends. At the time, we still kept in touch and we hung out during holidays and stuff, but I really came back into my old environment, and they were going down that finance route that I originally was going down. They were checking more boxes, and in speaking with them, I found that they were miserable. And so in speaking with, at this point, thousands of salespeople at the age of 22, 23, having deep, intimate conversations about what's important to salespeople long-term, having these conversations with some of my friends and family, and really observing, what sort of people were fulfilled and what sort of people on paper maybe should feel fulfilled but aren't. I had a lot of experience with that and my own self-inner journey as well. So I've created this piece, this mastermind. And the reason why I created it is because there's this stigma in sales that life for you is all about hitting a number. And it could feel like a trap 100%. And so what's interesting about sales is you can double your income in a year, right? So if you make $100,000 in a year, you're like, all right, I learned a lot, but I still don't feel great about myself. I'm going to go after 200,000. And so let's say after a year, maybe two, you make 200,000 and you're like, that was fun. I learned a lot, but I still don't feel great. Like that was fun. I feel okay, but I still feel emotionally back to where I started. So I'm going to make 300 and then 400 and 500. And in sales, I call it the golden hamster wheel of sales. And so there's so many salespeople out there that are constantly going after a number. without knowing why they want to go after that number. They feel that something in their external world will fill them up internally. And I think what ends up happening too is they feel this lack of fulfillment. So I help them get clear on what gifts they're here to express in their sales role and connect what they're doing to a more powerful why, so that they can feel more fulfilled in their role and understand what life is really about for them. And leave what ends up feeling like this rat race, this constant, never-ending race of trying to measure up to other people. And competition isn't bad so long as you know why you're doing what you're doing. So I help bridge that gap. I help salespeople get clarity in those areas.
So this is fascinating to me because it just reminded me of something that happened to me the November before COVID. I was flown out by the owner of a dispensary in Colorado. She had one of the largest dispensaries in Colorado. I met the owner. It's a funny story. I met her in Costa Rica the year before. We kept in touch, and she's like, I need you to fly out here and train my retail sales team. And I don't do a lot of retail training. I'm more B2B and B2C, but I'm like, yeah, sure. Sales is sales. I'll go out. And she wanted me to kind of observe what they were doing and then, do some training. So the first day I'm there and I'm watching essentially 18 to 24-year-old kids sell weed, sell edibles, sell pot, sell all this kind of stuff. And I had a 2-day training thing ready to go. But I realized I was in the hotel room that night. I'm like, this training is not going to work for these guys because the training was based on the typical sales mind of selling, how to sell more. And I talk about mind shifting and helping people. But what I found out was I sat them all in a room. And I usually ask when I start a training thing, why did you get into sales? And most people raise their hand to make money. I want to get into sales. I wanted to make a lot of money. My buddy was I wanted to get a lot of money. When I went around this room, not one person in the room said that they were selling weed to make money. They all said, well, my grandmother had cancer. I wanted to do something to help other people. Couple of them were honest, like, hey, I just wanted to get a discount on weed, but nobody was there to actually sell. They were there to help. And that's the first sales group of people I ever met that were actually there to help. So I had to change my whole philosophy, but it really was eye-opening to me because that whole piece of trying to talk them into helping a regular sales group, they already had that. I didn't even need to do that. So what you're talking about is so true. It's like the mindset of salespeople, and it's just the way it's been for decades and centuries. You got to sell, period. And that's what makes you feel crappy as a salesperson if that's all you're going for, right?
100%. That's a really interesting story,
isn't it?
I think that speaks to them having obviously a clear why beyond the number. I always say chasing money is not a vision, and so when I ask people what they want, they usually do say money,
right?
And I feel, a lot of us growing up too, we think about and we know and we've heard, yeah, money doesn't bring happiness. But there's a part of us like deep down that doesn't really believe that.
Right.
Like, no, I want to make a lot of money. Like I want to show off. Like that's right there. And it really takes some experiencing that emptiness that comes with what you thought would make you full. And so you're exactly right. And again, it doesn't make money the bad thing, but money is simply just a numerical value. It's an abstract symbol. But if we connect it to some sort of experience, for example, if you want to go on an amazing vacation you've always dreamed of with your family, or you want to buy a first home or a second home, you want to buy a home for your parents, like that's the beginning to connecting to something much bigger than just a number. But a lot of people are like, like buying a Ferrari sounds good. But when they have enough money to do so, they're like, no, I actually didn't really want that. So people they don't feel emotionally attached to something that's aligned for them and what's important to them. And obviously you got clear on what was important to to that team, but
Yep.
it's really important to get clear on those things from a leadership perspective too, because by default we believe a lot of us are money motivated, but number one, we don't know why. Number two, some of us simply aren't.
And I also think one of the problems in sales is you're expected to be money motivated. You're expected to sell. You're expected as a sales rep to hit your quotas and to be motivated by hitting your quotas. And that's why sales is, I think I saw a survey a month or so ago. It's the second highest turnover profession in the world, is our salespeople, because you're building it in. You're not setting them up for failure, but you are setting them up for disappointment quite more often than success. And if you don't have the personality to handle that, you're just going to go find a different job. And it's simply because if you're trained a different way, you can get through that. So talk to me about finding your why. How does it, what can a salesperson do, or someone who sells, to find their why? Like you're saying it, but are there things that they actually can do or sit down and think about to say, this is what I want really?
Yeah, there are. And I think what's really important is reverse engineering in a lot of ways. So there's two ways you can do this. I think number one is getting clear on how much you want to make and why specifically you want to make it. And specifically get really clear, okay, if you want to earn 250, why 250? Why not 300 or 200? Why that specific number? And once you are specific with it, you're really clear around those things, you'll start to feel that you feel attached to that number emotionally, which is really important to manifestation. You need to feel it and you need to know that it will happen. So you're really clear on those things. So that's number one when it comes to the number piece. Mm-hmm. And if people aren't clear, like if you're just starting out, for example, you're 22, 23, you don't know what life's about for you yet, or most don't. There's some that might pretend to, but it's really hard to be exactly clear on, okay, what's the legacy I want to leave? Right. So I'd say for the people starting out, be specific with the number and like write down a lot of things that feel really good to you. That would be really exciting experiences that you could either share with others or things that would really mean a lot to you. So I think that's number one, is like getting clear on the number if you're just sort of starting out. Mm-hmm. I think later on, what's important is a couple things. Like longer term, what brings you joy and what is the legacy you want to leave? Mm-hmm. And so I always ask three different questions. This is where I go into your life vision, your North Star. What do I want to contribute to the world? What do I want to experience? And how do I want to grow? And use your inspiration. I usually have someone ask the question. So I have the people I work with, I give them only a minute and a half, and I give them the questions ahead of time, but I have them trust their intuition, and I just have them write for a minute and a half in those three areas. And then you take a look at it and you're like, sometimes you're surprised by what your intuition tells you. Mm-hmm. And other times you're like, you know what? I have always wanted that. I just haven't written it out before. Right. So that's the North Star, the life vision stuff. And then I come into, okay, a year from now, what's really important to you? And just trust your intuition there as well. And if you ask yourself, relationally, emotionally, professionally, personally, financially, spiritually, in all of those areas, where I want to be a year from now. And if you start attaching what you're doing on a daily basis, every call you're making, to all 6 of those areas of your life, not only does it energize you more, you love the process more, and you enjoy the connections more because you feel connected to it. Life for you is more about than all the dials you're making or the calls you're making, right? It becomes a lot more than that. So I tend to reverse engineer once salespeople get a little bit older and they start getting clear on, okay, is leadership something I want to get into that I may be running away from or I'm scared to do? Or otherwise, maybe it is starting your own company. There's a reason why a lot of salespeople end up starting their own biz is because they know how to sell. So those things are really important. And what I always offer too is what's really important is to have the imagination and the mindset of a child. Because if we start using our imagination again, we really tap into what life's really about for us. And that's outside of all the expectations that have been placed on us from various areas of our
society. I mean, it's just, you're right. You check off the boxes, that famous song, Little Boxes. It's just, when you can have the courage and your family and your inner circle almost gives you the permission to say, check off your own boxes. Don't worry about, the boxes that society says you're supposed to check off. It's just a freeing, liberating feeling that you can do that and do what you want. And it's the same with selling. It's if I can be myself and sell rather than following this script, like the script is not me. The script is not my personality, which is why I'm a 25% closer, because I'm trying to shoehorn myself into a script and it doesn't fit my personality. If I can actually turn the script within my personality and make it work that way, that's when you not only start enjoying your life, but you start selling a hell of a lot more.
You're exactly right. And that's why finding your gifts is so important, in that, are you someone that gets a lot of joy from, there are people who are just really gifted at closing deals, and they just really love enrolling people into a vision, whether it's a company's vision or what have you, or bringing people across the finish line. Other people love building trust, but it's really important to get clear on what are those things. I define gifts as, by the way, things that bring you energy and make an impact on others. Talents are something that we acquire over time that we may be good at, but may not actually bring us a lot of energy. And so for you, that could be sales. That could just be a talent of yours. But how can you illuminate your gifts more in your sales role, so that you can bring the most amount of energy to every conversation? But you're exactly right. It's really making it your own. And we tend to put masks on all the time in different
the sales mask. Yep.
We put on masks at work when we're with clients and customers, and to be able to take off that mask in all situations and just be you save a lot of energy, because it's really tough being someone else all the time. And trust me, I've done it. Yep. And more than that, to be able to make the sales script your own makes the role a lot more exciting too, and you're able to actually impact people.
Right, and the customer doesn't feel like they're talking to a salesperson. I always say to salespeople, like, if you feel like you sound like a salesperson, imagine what you sound like to the customer. Because you sound 10 times worse if you're feeling it yourself. But I just did a post on LinkedIn. It's funny when I post a lot on LinkedIn, and you can see what posts actually reverberate or like have an effect. You'll have an average post, it'll get 1,000 views or 500 views. I did the one the other day about stop being a salesperson, stop turning into a salesperson and turn into yourself. That was the gist of it, what we're talking about. That thing blew up. So I'm like, wow, I must have struck a nerve, because there's a lot of salespeople out there who don't feel like they're being themselves in front of a customer. So it's pretty wild. Was
that the Jekyll and Hyde one?
That's the Jekyll and Hyde one, yeah.
Okay, yes, I do remember seeing that. Yes, definitely struck a chord. I mean, I remember it, so definitely struck a chord. That's exactly it. Exactly it.
So talk about, I was looking through your stuff here, and you mentioned a bit about having the right mindset when approaching your sales life or your professional life. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, mindset's really interesting, because I've found in speaking with people that your external game is a reflection of your internal game, and that life is all about what you choose to focus on. And in sales, it's an emotional roller coaster. You can have an amazing day or an amazing hour or an amazing 15 minutes. And then 15 minutes later or a day later or a week later, feel like your life is coming crashing down on you.
So true.
It's definitely not for, that speaks to that turnover number for sure, I think, because there's a lot of burn and churn and burn in the sales game for sure. And so, again, like I said, life is all what you choose to focus on. And so ultimately, when it boils down to it, the reason why we get into this negative mindset is because if you think about our brains, they're trying to solve problems all the time. So thousands of years ago, we had the same brains. We were in our caves, and we were strategizing ways to survive because we were worried that a neighboring tribe was going to attack us and kill us, or we were afraid that a predator was going to come up to us and kill us. So fast forward thousands of years to today, we have the same brains, but we don't have the same problems. So our brains make up problems. That's simple. So by default, our brains are always focused on what could go wrong because they're trying to keep us safe. And so I call that the parasite. You talk about Jekyll and Hyde with authenticity, but there's a little bit of the same deal with your narration. There's the parasite, which latches onto events and tries to drain your energy. This, maybe you messed up in quotes, a sales call or a deal fell through. And you're focused on, you start getting this negative thought pattern. Man, am I really good at this? Maybe sales isn't for me. I'm just the worst. I'm never going to be anything. And you get caught up, and then all of a sudden your thoughts shape your beliefs about yourself. Your beliefs shape your actions, and your actions shape your results. And so if your thoughts are in a negative thought pattern and you're like, I'm just going to call it today, I'm just in a bad mood, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity. And a lot of people do, they just call it. And they're like, I'm just in a bad mood today.
Yeah.
So how do you snap out of this? Well, there's a couple things you can do. The first one is just to get clear on, okay, what am I choosing to focus on right now? Am I focused on everything that went wrong with that call? Usually, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so once you get clear on, okay, what am I focusing on right now? You flip it and you say, okay, what's the opposite? If I'm focusing on everything that went wrong, what went well for me? Okay, and you start finding the gifts, and the world starts looking a little bit brighter. And then after that, you ask, in order to take action, you ask yourself, what empowering question do I need to ask myself right now? And the reason why you ask that is, remember, the brain is a problem-solving device, and it likes to solve problems. So give it a good problem to chew on. And that problem turns into the question, what empowering question do I need to ask myself right now? Or what do I need to focus on right now? And all of a sudden, instead of focusing on everything you didn't want or you don't want, you're now focusing on everything you do want. And I tell clients at that point too, what empowering question do I need to ask myself right now to take one step closer towards my why? Hey, you might be in a bad state, but it's really easy to snap out of it in a second to change your state. And your state is based on what you choose to focus on. And so it's for that reason, and you could obviously play this out into a lot of different scenarios,
sure,
but it's really that simple of a formula. And it all has to do with becoming aware of the fact that the parasite is playing on in your mind, and you flip it, and now the ally is playing in your mind.
That's such a brilliant thing to point out. It's also pretty hard to do. And I'm saying this because a couple of personal experiences. There's been many studies done that have said that the human brain, you talk about the lizard brain, you talk about the brain from the caveman brain, the brain, I think the last thing I saw was 87% more inclined to focus on a negative thought or action than it is a positive one. So think about social media for a second. And this just happened to me. And when I caught myself doing it, I could not, I was actually shocked myself. So I actually got on TikTok about 5 weeks ago. A colleague and I, we challenged each other. I started TikTok. My 12-year-old gave me the tutorial. I was all set. Well, I had a video that actually went viral. It has like 300,000 views at this point. I still don't know why, but I've had 300,000 views. I've got at least 10,000 comments, and I would say 9,975 are positive. But you got those jackasses out there that just write something negative. And I was spending this entire day, when this went viral this one day, and I was just getting constantly notification after notification. I got this one guy who gave a negative comment. He was an asshole. And I was like, what the hell? Why is this guy saying that? There are 8,000 wonderful, awesome comments, and I'm focused on this one jack off who didn't like my thing. And it took me like 3 hours to realize, why was I feeling so anxious? And it was because of this one guy's stupid comment. And that was my brain doing that to me. And you have to be aware of that.
100%. And that's why I really feel, and why I post a lot about meditation, and why I feel meditation is really important in sales. Now, I don't think it's mandatory to be an amazing person. A lot of people are like, meditation's the only way, the only way, the only way. For me, it was one of the ways, for sure. It's made a huge impact in my life. But the reason why I bring this in at this point is because it gives you the space to become aware of when those sorts of thoughts pop in. And because you're just sitting there, there's nothing you can do or act on those thoughts, those impulses. And so if you even sit for 5-10 minutes a day, there will be negative thoughts that come in. Like you said, 85%, 90% of your thoughts are negative. And by the way, 90% of the thoughts, you have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of them are the same thoughts you thought yesterday. So your thoughts don't change all that much.
Wow.
So the more we become aware of our thoughts over and over again, we can get clear on the ones that don't serve us, because we've probably played them out a little bit. And so again, back to meditation, if you sit there quietly and you watch these thoughts come up, and maybe the parasite, there's a storm in your mind for those 5 minutes, but then you open your eyes and you realize that wasn't true. Right there, when you realize that, you became aware. And so it creates space between the thought and the impulse you have to act on it. And so it's for that reason why I think, especially now in sales, it's all about go, 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 go. If I'm not filling every millisecond of my time from the moment I wake up at 4:30 a.m. or whenever these, the salespeople, they're all go, 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 wake up. So when I go to bed at night, right, I'm filling up all my time. The parasite could have been playing out for 95% of that, and you're not taking aligned action that's aligned towards your vision. And that's why I feel taking spaces, you go a lot further, faster. But overall, you're exactly right. This stuff is hard. It is hard. It's hard. I mean, by default, that's our mode. But that's the journey right there. Because our whole life, you can make all the money in the world. But if you're still focused on everything you don't have, and you have billions of dollars, you have an amazing family, but you're focused on the comment over here, right? That's your external world. And, it can become a living hell, or what I call a suffering state. So it's why the internal game is so important on such a fast-paced game like sales. It actually becomes a superpower. It's what separates, in my view, the top 1% from the bunch, is that they are very aware of those things.
So you're looking at someone, I've heard a gajillion positive things about meditation. I've always thought that I was just not a meditating type. So here's your chance, Brian. Convince Alan Langer that I should start meditating. What do I need to do?
Well, so it's you to start meditating. It's funny, that's the one thing with meditation is it really, it can be forced, but overall it's sort of a paradox in that way, because the whole idea of it is to take a step back. But here's what I'd say. We have a choice, as I mentioned. We have a choice to suffer, or we have a choice to live in a beautiful state, in a trusting state. And so usually we spend, I'll go into brainwaves in a second to back up the science here, because usually that you're able to, that gives your brain something more to chew on, the analytical side of us, is that we spend most of our time in beta, which is that fight or flight, high-paced thinking, always strategizing. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening is 95% of our actions today come from our subconscious, meaning they came and they were formed from the ages of 0 and 10. Okay, so all the actions being played out today, 95% of them are from when you were from 0 to 10. You were in a brainwave state called theta at the time. And theta is this imaginative state. You're forming your brain. You're forming your external world. your model of the world is forming during that time. And so in order to reprogram that, you must either, there's three ways. Number one is to repeat, is to get in a repetition no matter what, over and over and over again. If you repeat a certain action, your body wires together, and that starts becoming, you short circuit your subconscious, and that recreates things through action. Or what I found is the easier way is to reprogram your mind. And the way you reprogram your mind is to get into that theta state again and re-hypnotize yourself. And so what's so important to manifestation is to getting out of that strategizing, that lizard brain, that fast moving mind state, and back into theta. And the only way to do that is to meditate, is to sit quietly until your brain and your mind quiets down. And from there, you say a mantra to yourself that morning, and you feel it in your bones and your body. And if you do it at the beginning of the day and at night, I'm sure you've heard of affirmations.
Yep.
If you do those things over and over again, you'll slowly realize that you start changing your state day to day. And it's because you're slowly reprogramming your brain. And so if you want all those actions out there, you want all those results, what ends up happening sometimes is consciously we want a result, but subconsciously we push it away because we have old programming. So to meditate is to reprogram your mind. If you want better results, you'll look to reprogram your mind, and meditation is one way to do it.
Wow. That's some fascinating stuff right there. The thing that, like, for me, I was the go, get up early, go after as many sales as I could when I was selling full time and, being the number one sales rep and all that stuff. And then I realized that I realized a lot of different things, which is why I am today. And like 5 years ago, I would have never realized that negative thought was affecting me like I did recently. Like I have that much more of an awareness of myself. So, but the meditation piece is something that I've been considering adding. So kind of thank you for explaining it a little better. Now I get it. So we are flying. We're almost at 35 minutes already, which is crazy, which means this has been a great podcast. So it is time for the Ask Alan segment of the podcast. And we've got a good one for Brian to answer. This comes from Jerry in Sarasota Springs, Florida. And Jerry writes, this is for all the Jerrys out there. I know there are a bunch who are listening to this podcast. This is you. Pay attention, because this is such a big problem in sales, especially in corporate sales. And I want to hear how Brian answers this. And then I have my own thoughts on it as well. So Jerry asks, or he says, I am always being told to follow the same sales process and script to everyone I meet. It feels fake and salesy and disingenuous. Is there a way to overcome this? And then I love this end. Or should I just quit my damn job? So Jerry asked that. What would you say to Jerry, Brian?
I think, I think you actually answered this pretty well earlier. And that is, at the end of the day, remember you're interacting with a human. And when you try to fit a human in a one-size-fits-all box like that, they're going to feel that naturally, innately. And that's a problem. That's definitely a problem. And I feel, number one, it sounds like Jerry might be first starting out. So I think it's important to, what I would say first is, number one, go to your sales manager and say, hey, this is how I feel. I meet so many younger salespeople that feel a certain way, but don't make their, I'm going to call them problems. They don't make their problems known.
Yep.
And so your sales leader can't help you unless you come to him with that problem. You're not going to sell if you don't feel good. If you feel really good using that script, I'd say you'd actually end up probably making a lot of sales. It'd probably be better to change it based on the person. But if you don't feel good, number one, going into a sales call, you're not going to make a sale. So that'd be my number one to all that. But number two is it's so important to cater and to make a sales script your own. I think sales scripts are important, especially for those just starting out. You need some sort of format. There's definitely a balance between that there are some boxes you need to check. There are some powerful questions you want to try out to see how they feel to you. But to make it a one-size-fits-all piece, you're not showing your authenticity. You're putting on a mask, and it sounds like you're a robot selling to a human. And again, they're going to feel that. So I'd get really clear on what parts feel good, what parts don't, and work with your sales manager to make it a more authentic script for you.
That's a great point. And there's a couple things that ran through my mind as you were answering that. One, asking your sales manager is a great tool and a great thing to do for a couple of reasons. One, you're letting the sales manager know how you feel. It's also going to it's going to show you how good the sales manager is being a leader. Like if that manager says tough shit, go do that sales script. Then you know what, Jerry, you probably need to find a better place to sell. If you get a sales manager say, no, let me teach you how to sell within your personality, then you've at least got a decent sales leader there. But the other thing is, I'm going to tell a quick story. So when I was really young, one of my first sales jobs, I worked for this very large, I will call it a big box retailer. That's all I'll say. And there was a gigantic amount of sales. There's just thousands of salespeople across the country. And in the area of the country I was in, we had a monthly sales meeting with about 300 people. It was like the East Coast, northern East Coast area. And the cumulative closing rate of the entire branch was like 22%. It was pathetic. And I was like 28% because everybody was trained this one particular pitch to do. So one day they flew in this big wig, just like Glenn Ross from the corporate office. And he came to this sales meeting. And I will never forget to this day what he said. First of all, he's yelling at us just like Alex Baldwin did. He's yelling at everyone in the room because we all suck. We're all terrible salespeople. And he said, it is your obligation as an employee to this company to do the exact same sales pitch every single time to every single person you meet, no matter what. The exact same one. And then he said, word for word. And I was like, I don't know, in my mid 20s. And I'm like, that just sounds really wrong. Like, doesn't make any sense to me. And everyone was like writing their notes and everything. And I'm like, wow. And that was their corporate philosophy. And they've since gone bankrupt because of it. But I was blown away by like, that's how some of the corporations think. Like, if you follow the process, you will sell, and they're happy with a 26% closing team. And it just blew me away. So that was my experience in that, Jerry. And I did find a new job. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And look, I think that and you may be able to speak on this more, but I feel like that is that's sort of the old way. I think that there is this new wave of making it your own. There's a lot more autonomy, I've found anyway, because I got that a little bit from a past sales job as well. But I think it's so important that humans just want to be autonomous. We want to have the freedom to do these things. And it just makes the employees a lot happier and a lot more excited to sell. So,
of course. And you're 100% right. I've seen the worm turning a little bit as the years have gone on where, sales has become much more personal and the really good ones are relationship based and helping based rather than selling based. And ever since the internet, let's be honest, ever since the internet happened, the power went from the salesperson to the actual customer. The customer has all the power now because they have all the information. Prior to that, they had no information. They had to rely on the salesperson. And more often than not, the salesperson would lie or make up stuff and sell them shit that they didn't need. So, but you're right. So anyway, Jerry, I hope that answers your question. But yeah, talk to your sales manager. See if there's a way to interject your own personality into the sales script, because there needs to be a process. But if you can become Jerry and not the process, Jerry is going to sell a lot more than the process will. That I know for sure. So, Brian, this has been awesome. You have any final words that you can impart on our awesome sales and marketing audience tonight?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and especially in sales, to feel like you're in a hurry or feel like you're behind or feel like you're not making enough. And I just really want to hammer home the point to trust the process, trust yourself, keep going. And it's really easy to get discouraged right away, but just understand that life is a journey. You're in it for the long game, and to approach life that way, because it becomes a lot more fun, a lot more fulfilling long term if you just trust yourself and trust the process and not feel like you're in a hurry.
Amen, brother. How can people, if people want to have a conversation with Brian Hines or contact you for some training, where do they go? How do they find you?
Yeah, so you can hop on my LinkedIn. It's just linkedin.com/Brian Hines. You and I are connected. You can find me through that way. You can shoot me a DM on there. You can check me out on Instagram at Brian J. Hines Coaching, or check out my website, brianjhines.com.
And Hines is Hines. Brian is with an I. So just in case you didn't know that, obviously it'll all be in the show notes, so you guys can check that out on the website. So Brian, I really appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying the rest of your shock talk. You're Stella. I have the shock talk, and I want to thank you for joining me tonight from Chicago. I want to thank everyone else out there for joining me on episode 52 of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. I want to say goodnight to Brian. I want to say goodnight to you guys. But before I go, remember, the website is marketingandsalespodcast.com. The Ask Alan segment is at the top. You send me a question. If I read it, just like Jerry, you're going to get a signed autographed copy of my book. Brian, thanks again for joining me tonight. Everyone, you have a great night as well, and we'll see you again next time.